The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Bethany Rose as she stumbled along the dusty trail, her once fine dress torn and soiled, her lips cracked from dehydration. She had been walking for 3 days since the stagecoach robbery that had taken everything, her belongings, her money, and the last remnants of her hope. The distant sound of hoofbeats barely registered in her fading consciousness as the world began to spin around her. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a tall figure on horseback, silhouetted against the blazing sky, and then she fainted in the dust with nowhere to go. Yates Kincaid reined in his stallion abruptly when he spotted the woman collapsed on the trail ahead. In the 10 years he'd been ranching in Arizona territory, he'd seen his share of desperate souls, but something about the crumpled form in the dust sent him rushing forward with unusual urgency. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. Kneeling beside her, he noted her shallow breathing and the unnatural flush of her skin. Heat exhaustion, most likely, and a bad case at that. Without hesitation, he gathered her limp form into his arms, surprised at how light she felt despite the layers of her travel dress. "Easy now," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. "I've got you." Yates lifted her carefully onto his horse, then mounted behind her, one arm securing her against his chest as he turned toward home. The Lazy K Ranch was only a few miles away. She'd nearly made it to civilization before collapsing. As they rode, he studied her face. Even covered in dust and clearly suffering, there was a delicate beauty to her features that stirred something inside him. He estimated she was in her early 20s, and her clothing, though now bedraggled, spoke of refinement. "Who are you?" he wondered aloud. "And what in God's name are you doing out here alone?" The Lazy K came into view as they crested a small rise, a sprawling ranch house with several outbuildings, corrals, and the bunkhouse where his handful of cowhands lived. Smoke curled from the kitchen chimney, a welcome sight after a long day checking fence lines in the southern pasture. As he approached, his housekeeper Martha emerged onto the porch, her expression changing from welcome to alarm as she spotted the unconscious woman in his arms. "Mr. Kincaid." "What on earth?" "Found her collapsed on the East Trail," Yates explained as he carefully dismounted, still holding the woman. "Heat stroke, I reckon. Get the guest room ready and bring water, lots of it." Martha, a sturdy widow in her 50s who had worked for Yates since he established the ranch, immediately sprang into action. "I'll fetch clean linens and my medicines," she called over her shoulder as she hurried inside. Yates carried the unconscious woman into the house, the relative coolness of the interior a sharp contrast to the blistering heat outside. The guest bedroom was modest but comfortable, with a sturdy oak bed and simple furnishings. He laid her down gently just as Martha returned with an armload of supplies. "You'll need to step out now, Mr. Kincaid," Martha said firmly. "The poor thing needs to be undressed and cooled down proper. I'll call you when she's decent." Reluctantly, Yates nodded and left the room, his worry for the mysterious woman surprising him with its intensity. He paced the hallway, his usual calm demeanor unsettled. Who was she? Why was she traveling alone? The questions multiplied as he waited. After what seemed an eternity, Martha opened the door. "She's cooling down but still unconscious. I've got her in a nightgown and put cool compresses on her. The fever's high but steady." Yates nodded. "Will she be all right? Can't say for certain yet. Next few hours will tell. She's young and looks strong despite being half-starved and dehydrated. What I want to know is what happened to her. Those bruises on her arms didn't come from falling in the dust." A surge of protective anger rose in Yates at Martha's words. "Bruises?" Like someone grabbed her hard. and there's an old scar on her temple, not fresh, but concerning all the same. Yates's jaw tightened. I'll ride into town tomorrow, see if anyone's reported a missing woman or knows anything about stagecoach passengers. Good idea. Meanwhile, I'll sit with her through the night. No need, Martha. You get some rest. I'll take first watch. Martha raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Very well. Call me if there's any change. After she left, Yates pulled a chair next to the bed and settled in to watch over the mysterious woman. In the lamplight, with the dust washed from her face, he could see she was indeed beautiful. Honey-colored hair spread across the pillow, delicate features now relaxed in unconsciousness. A strange protective feeling washed over him, surprising in its intensity. "You're safe now," he murmured. "Whatever you're running from, you're safe here." As the night deepened around the ranch house, Yates maintained his vigil, occasionally replacing the cool cloth on her forehead, wondering about the story behind the woman who had literally fallen at his feet. Dawn was breaking when she first stirred, a soft moan escaping her lips as her eyelids fluttered. Yates leaned forward, setting aside the book he'd been pretending to read. "Easy now," he said softly. "You're safe." Her eyes opened fully, startlingly blue against her pale skin, and immediately widened with fear as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings and the man beside her bed. She tried to sit up, panic evident in her movements. "Where am I? Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse but cultured, with a slight Eastern accent. "You're at the Lazy K Ranch. I'm Yates Kincaid, the owner. I found you collapsed on the trail yesterday afternoon. You've been unconscious with heat exhaustion." She sank back against the pillows, clearly exhausted by even that small exertion. "The stagecoach, they took everything." "Robbery?" Yates asked gently. She nodded weakly. 3 days ago, they took all the valuables, the horses too. The driver was shot." Her voice broke. "I've been walking since." "You're safe now," Yates repeated. "What's your name?" She hesitated, as if debating whether to trust him. "Bethany," she finally said. "Bethany Rose. Miss Rose, you need rest and recovery. Martha, my housekeeper, will look after you. You're welcome to stay as long as necessary." Relief flooded her features, quickly followed by suspicion. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." The question caught Yates off guard. In the untamed territories, helping strangers wasn't uncommon. Survival often depended on it, but her wariness spoke of experiences that had taught her not to trust easily. "Out here, we help those in need," he said simply. "It's how we all survive." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid." "Yates, please. Now can I bring you some water? You need to drink." When she nodded, he helped her sit up slightly and held a cup to her lips. She drank eagerly but carefully, clearly aware of the dangers of drinking too quickly after dehydration. "Small sips," he encouraged. "There's plenty more." After she'd had enough, she sank back against the pillows, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "I have nothing to pay you with," she whispered. "They took everything." "We'll worry about that later," Yates assured her. "For now, just rest." Her eyes were already closing, her body demanding the sleep it needed to heal. Yates watched her for a few moments more, then quietly left the room to find Martha. The housekeeper was in the kitchen, already preparing breakfast. "How is she?" she asked as soon as Yates entered. "Awake briefly. Her name is Bethany Rose. She was on a stagecoach that was robbed 3 days ago. She's been walking since." Martha clicked her tongue in sympathy. "Poor thing. 3 days in this heat with no water or shelter. It's a miracle she's alive. I'm riding into town to speak with Sheriff Taylor, see if he's heard about the robbery. Will you stay with her, of course?" "Don't worry. She'll be well looked after." Yates nodded his thanks and headed out to the stable, his mind still on the woman in his guest bedroom. Something about Bethany Rose stirred protective instincts he hadn't felt in years, not since the death of his younger sister during the journey west. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in those blue eyes, or the courage it must have taken to walk for 3 days through the unforgiving desert. Whatever it was, he found himself unusually invested in her welfare and determined to discover the full story behind her desperate journey. The ride into Cedar Springs, the nearest town to the Lazy K, took just over an hour. The morning was already heating up, promising another scorching summer day. The town itself was growing rapidly, no longer just a dusty outpost, but developing into a proper settlement with a main street lined with businesses, including a new hotel that catered to the increasing number of travelers heading west. Sheriff Taylor's office was next to the jailhouse, a sturdy building with a sign declaring law and order above the door. The sheriff himself was a former Texas Ranger, a no-nonsense man who had brought much-needed stability to the region. "Kincaid," he greeted as Yates entered. "What brings you to town?" Yates explained about finding Bethany and her mention of the stagecoach robbery. The sheriff's expression grew serious. "Heard about that yesterday when a cavalry patrol found the wreckage. Westbound Butterfield stage, happened about 20 miles east. Driver dead, passengers scattered. They brought in an elderly couple yesterday afternoon, both in rough shape but alive. Mentioned a young woman who'd been traveling with them." "That would be Miss Rose," Yates confirmed. "She said they took everything." Taylor nodded grimly. "Sounds like the Decker gang. They've hit 3 stages in the last month. Army's out looking for them, but they know the territory." He paused. "The old couple, the Whitfields, they were worried sick about the young woman, said she was traveling to meet her fiancé in California." Yates felt an unexpected twinge at the word fiancé, but kept his expression neutral. "Did they say anything else about her?" "Just that she was from Boston. School teacher, I believe. They seemed fond of her, met her on the journey, and took her under their wing." The sheriff studied Yates curiously. "She recovering all right?" "She will be. Martha's looking after her." "Good. Tell her the Whitfields are at Doc Sullivan's place, recovering. I'm sure they'd be relieved to know she's safe." Yates promised he would and headed to the general store to purchase some necessities for their guest, a few simple garments, toiletries, and other essentials a lady might need. The proprietor's wife helped him select appropriate items, though she couldn't quite hide her curiosity about the woman they were intended for. "Just a traveler who fell ill," Yates explained vaguely, unwilling to invite gossip. Cedar Springs, like most small towns, thrived on stories about its inhabitants, and he didn't want Bethany to become the subject of speculation. On the ride back to the ranch, his thoughts remained on the revelation that Bethany was traveling to meet a fiancé. It was none of his business, of course, but he found himself wondering what kind of man waited for her in California, and whether the man knew the courage and determination his future wife possessed. Upon returning to the Lazy K, Yates found Martha in the kitchen preparing a light broth for their guest. "She woke again while you were gone," the housekeeper reported. "More lucid this time, but still weak. I helped her wash up a bit and change into a fresh nightgown. She asked about you." "About me?" Yates couldn't hide his surprise. Martha smiled knowingly. "Wanted to know more about her rescuer. I told her you've been running the Lazy K for 10 years, came out from Kentucky after the war, and that you're the most respected rancher in the territory." "Martha," Yates groaned. "She doesn't need my life story." "Maybe not, but a woman likes to know whose roof she's under," Martha retorted, unrepentant. "I'm taking this broth up to her now. You can bring those packages up in a bit, give her time to eat first." Yates agreed and busied himself with ranch business while Martha tended to Bethany. He reviewed the ledgers, noting with satisfaction that the spring cattle drive had been profitable enough to consider expanding the herd next year. The Lazy K was prospering, but it was a lonely success. At 32, Yates had built the life he'd dreamed of, but increasingly found himself wondering if there should be more to it than cattle and land. When Martha returned downstairs, she nodded toward the packages. "She's finished eating and is sitting up. Good time to take those up." Gathering the parcels, Yates headed upstairs, suddenly aware of a nervousness he hadn't felt in years. He knocked gently on the guest room door. "Come in," called a soft voice. Bethany was indeed sitting up, propped against pillows, her honey-colored hair neatly braided over one shoulder. Though still pale, she looked remarkably better than she had the previous day. "Mr. Kincaid," she greeted him with a small smile. "Martha says I have you to thank for my rescue." "Anyone would have done the same," he replied, suddenly feeling awkward as he stood holding the packages. "I brought you some things from town, clothes and such. I wasn't sure what you might need." Surprise and gratitude flickered across her face. "That's incredibly kind of you." "It's nothing," he said, setting the packages on the foot of the bed. "I also spoke with Sheriff Taylor. The Whitfields are safe. They're recovering at the doctor's house in town." "Oh, thank goodness." Relief brightened her features. "They were so kind to me on the journey. I was worried when we got separated after." She trailed off, her expression darkening at the memory. "The sheriff thinks it was the Decker gang," Yates told her, taking a seat in the chair beside the bed. "They've been causing trouble throughout the territory." Bethany nodded slowly. "There were 5 of them. They stopped the stage with a fallen tree across the road. When Mr. Jensen, the driver, resisted, they shot him." Her voice caught. "It happened so fast." "You don't need to talk about it if it's too difficult," Yates said gently. "No, it's all right. They took everything of value, money, jewelry, even Mr. Jensen's boots. Then they took the horses and left us there." Her hands twisted in the bedsheet. "Mr. Whitfield was injured in the attack and Mrs. Whitfield refused to leave him. I offered to try to reach the next station and bring help. I thought it was closer." "That was brave," Yates commented, impressed by her courage. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Or foolish. I've never been in this part of the country before. I underestimated the distance and the heat. The cavalry found the Whitfields yesterday. They're going to be fine." He hesitated. "The sheriff mentioned you were traveling to California." "To meet your fiancé." A shadow passed over her face. "That was the plan," she said softly. Something in her tone made Yates curious, but he didn't press. Instead, he asked, "Is there anyone we should send word to? Someone who might be worried about you?" Bethany shook her head. "No, there's no one. My parents died last year, influenza. I was teaching at a girls' school in Boston, but—" She trailed off again. "But," Yates prompted gently. She seemed to debate with herself before continuing. "James, my fiancé, he's a businessman in San Francisco. We've been corresponding for nearly a year. He sent money for my passage west for our wedding." A flush of embarrassment colored her cheeks. "It sounds ridiculous when I say it aloud. Traveling across the country to marry a man I've never met in person." "It's not uncommon," Yates assured her, though he found himself unreasonably irritated with this unknown James who had allowed his bride-to-be to make such a dangerous journey alone. "Perhaps not, but now I have no money, no belongings, and no way to contact him." She looked down at her hands. "I don't even have a photograph anymore. Everything was in my trunk." "We can send a telegram from town when you're stronger," Yates suggested. "Let him know what happened." "Yes, I suppose we should," she agreed, though without enthusiasm. "Mr. Kincaid, I want you to know I intend to repay your kindness. I'm not without skills I can teach, so keep accounts. Once I'm recovered, I'll find a way to work off my debt to you." Her determination touched him. "There's no debt, Miss Rose. but we can discuss all that when you're fully recovered. For now, you should rest." She looked as if she wanted to argue, but fatigue was already evident in the droop of her shoulders. "Thank you again for the clothes," she said. "It will be good to have something of my own again." "You're welcome. I'll leave you to rest now." As he closed the door behind him, Yates found himself thinking about Bethany's situation. A woman alone in the Western Territories had few options, especially one with no money and no connections. If her fiancé didn't come through, what would become of her? The thought troubled him more than it should have. Over the next few days, Bethany's strength gradually returned. By the fourth day, she was able to leave her room and join Yates and Martha for meals in the dining room, dressed in one of the simple calico dresses he had purchased for her. "It feels wonderful to be up and about," she confessed as Martha served a hearty lunch of beef stew and freshly baked bread. "I've never been one for idleness." "You needed the rest," Martha insisted. "Still do if you ask me. You're still too pale." "I feel much better, truly." "Well enough to be useful." She glanced at Yates. "I noticed your bookshelf is quite disorganized. Perhaps I could help sort it while I'm recuperating." Yates smiled at her eagerness. "If it would make you happy, though I have to warn you, many of those books haven't been touched in years." "All the more reason to give them some attention," she replied with unexpected enthusiasm. "Books are like friends, they shouldn't be neglected." Martha exchanged an amused glance with Yates. "I've been telling him that for years. Maybe he'll listen to a pretty face." Bethany blushed at the compliment, and Yates found himself charmed by her reaction. In the short time she'd been at the Lazy K, he discovered she was well-educated, articulate, and possessed a quiet determination that he admired. She spoke intelligently on a range of subjects, from literature to current events, and listened with genuine interest when he discussed the ranch operations. After lunch, true to her word, Bethany began organizing the bookshelf in the small study that Yates rarely used. He found excuses to check on her throughout the afternoon, bringing her tea or simply asking if she needed anything. "You have an impressive collection," she commented during one such visit, holding a volume of Emerson's essays. "I wouldn't have expected to find such a library on a cattle ranch." "My mother was a great reader," Yates explained. "She insisted on bringing as many books as possible when we came west. She believed civilization followed literature." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was. She died of fever my first year here. My father passed a few years before that, during the war." Sympathy softened Bethany's features. "I'm sorry, it's hard to lose parents no matter our age." "It is," he agreed. "You mentioned yours passed last year," she nodded, replacing the Emerson on the shelf. "Within weeks of each other. My father first, then my mother. They left some debts, which is why I had to leave my teaching position. The school was understanding, but they couldn't continue my employment once the creditors took our home." The matter-of-fact way she described such devastating losses impressed Yates. "And that's when you began corresponding with your fiancé." James had placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper, a businessman seeking a well-educated wife willing to relocate to California. She smiled wryly. "It sounds terribly unromantic, doesn't it? But his letters were kind and intelligent. He offered security when I had none." Yates frowned slightly. "But you've never met him?" "No. We exchanged photographs, but as I mentioned, mine was lost in the robbery." She sighed. "I should really send that telegram soon. He'll be expecting me in San Francisco by the end of the month." "We can ride into town tomorrow if you feel up to it," Yates offered, though the thought of helping her contact the man who would take her away from the Lazy K gave him no pleasure. "Thank you. I should also check on the Whitfields while we're there." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Yates found himself more at ease in Bethany's company than he could remember being with anyone in years. There was something about her quiet strength and intelligence that resonated with him. "It's beautiful here," she said softly, her gaze on the distant mountains. "So different from Boston. There's a wildness to it, but also a peacefulness." "That's what drew me to this land," Yates admitted. "After the war, I couldn't settle back into Kentucky society. Too many memories, too many ghosts. Out here, there's room to breathe, to start fresh." "I can understand that appeal," she replied, "though I imagine it was difficult establishing a ranch from nothing." "The hardest thing I've ever done," he agreed. "The first few years were brutal: drought, rustlers, conflicts with neighboring ranchers. There were days I nearly gave up. But you didn't. No, something about this land gets under your skin, makes you stubborn." He glanced at her profile, elegant in the fading light. "Like someone else I've recently met who walked for 3 days through the desert." She laughed softly. "That wasn't stubbornness. That was desperation. Call it what you will. Not many would have survived what you did." A comfortable silence fell between them as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. In that moment, Yates realized with sudden clarity that he didn't want her to leave, that the thought of her continuing on to San Francisco to marry a man she'd never met filled him with a sense of wrongness he couldn't explain. The revelation unsettled him. He barely knew Bethany Rose, had no claim on her, and certainly no right to interfere in her plans. Yet he couldn't deny the connection he felt with her, stronger than anything he'd experienced before. Tomorrow they would ride into town, and she would send her telegram. And then what? Would her fiancé send money for her continued journey? Would she disappear from Yates's life as suddenly as she had entered it? The thought left him with an emptiness he wasn't prepared for. The next morning dawned clear and mild, a perfect day for the ride into Cedar Springs. Bethany appeared for breakfast dressed in the blue calico dress that brought out the color of her eyes, her hair neatly arranged in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. "You look well," Yates commented, rising as she entered the dining room. "Thank you. I feel quite recovered." She accepted the chair he held for her. "Is it a long ride to town?" "About an hour. I've saddled Daisy for you. She's gentle and sure-footed." Martha bustled in with plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "Make sure she eats properly before you leave," she instructed Yates. "And don't keep her out too long. She's still recovering." "I'm sitting right here," Bethany reminded them with amusement. "And I assure you both, I'm perfectly capable of a short ride." After breakfast they set out, Bethany proving to be a competent if cautious rider. The journey passed pleasantly, with Yates pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the early days of his ranching endeavors. "How many cattle do you run?" she asked as they rode side by side. "About 2,000 head now. Started with just 50 when I bought the place." Her eyebrows rose in appreciation. "That's impressive growth." "Been lucky with good grazing years and strong markets," he replied modestly. "Plus, having reliable hands makes all the difference. Some of my men have been with me since the beginning." "That speaks well of you as an employer." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Fair pay for fair work, that's all. And I don't tolerate the kind of rowdiness some ranchers allow." As they approached Cedar Springs, Bethany grew quieter, and Yates suspected she was thinking about the telegram she would soon send. He felt a similar tension building in his own chest, an irrational desire to delay their arrival, to keep her with him just a little longer. The town was bustling with its usual mid-morning activity. They tethered their horses outside the telegraph office, and Yates escorted Bethany inside. The operator, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up as they entered. "Morning, Kincaid. What can I do for you?" "Miss Rose needs to send a telegram to San Francisco." "Of course. Just write out your message, miss, and I'll take care of it. Bethany hesitated, then accepted the pencil and form the operator offered. Yates stepped back to give her privacy, but couldn't help noticing her expression as she stared at the blank paper. After a long moment, she began to write, her pencil moving slowly across the page. When she finished, she handed the form back to the operator, who calculated the cost. "That'll be 75 cents for the message." Yates stepped forward immediately, placing coins on the counter. "I've got it." Bethany looked as if she wanted to object, but then nodded her thanks. As they stepped back outside, Yates asked gently, "Everything all right?" "Yes, fine," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "I simply informed James of the robbery and my current situation, asked for instructions regarding continuing my journey." "I see." She squared her shoulders. "Now, could we visit the Whitfields? I'd like to see for myself that they are well." They walked to Dr. Sullivan's house, which doubled as the town's medical facility. The doctor, a friendly man in his 50s, greeted them warmly. "Miss Rose, Sheriff Taylor mentioned you'd been found. The Whitfields will be delighted to see you. They've been fretting about your welfare." He led them to a small recovery room where the elderly couple was resting. Mrs. Whitfield, a plump woman with silver hair, burst into tears at the sight of Bethany. "Oh, my dear girl. We feared the worst when you didn't return." Bethany embraced the older woman gently. "I'm so sorry to have worried you. I misjudged the distance badly." Mr. Whitfield, his arm in a sling, smiled weakly from his bed. "The important thing is you're safe. We've been praying for you." The reunion was emotional, with the Whitfields expressing profound gratitude to Yates for rescuing Bethany. As they talked, Yates observed the genuine affection between Bethany and the older couple, and his respect for her grew even deeper. When it was time to leave, Mrs. Whitfield pulled Bethany into another embrace. "What will you do now, dear, about your situation in San Francisco?" "I've sent a telegram to James. I'm waiting for his response." Mrs. Whitfield glanced at Yates, then back to Bethany with a knowing look. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns for the better, my dear. Keep your heart open to possibilities." The cryptic comment brought a flush to Bethany's cheeks, and she quickly changed the subject, promising to visit again soon. As they left the doctor's house, Bethany suggested they explore the town a bit before returning to the ranch. "If you don't mind," she added, "I'd like to get a sense of Cedar Springs." "I'd be happy to show you around," Yates replied, pleased by her interest. They walked along the main street, stopping at various shops. At the general store, Bethany admired a display of fabrics while Yates purchased some supplies for the ranch. Next, they visited the bookshop, where Bethany's eyes lit up at the small but well-curated selection. "Oh, they have the new Dickens," she exclaimed, picking up a copy of Our Mutual Friend. Without hesitation, Yates purchased it for her, waving away her protests. "Consider it a welcome gift to Arizona territory." Their final stop was the small cafe for a light lunch before the ride back. As they waited for their food, Bethany gazed around at the other patrons. "Everyone seems to know you," she observed. "They all nodded or greeted you." Yates shrugged. "Small town, everyone knows everyone. It must be nice being part of a community like that." "It has its advantages," he agreed, "and its disadvantages. Privacy can be hard to come by." She smiled. "I noticed. The woman at the bookshop seemed very curious about me." "Curious is a polite way of putting it," Yates said with a chuckle. "Mrs. Henderson is the town's foremost gossip. By sundown, half the territory will know I was in town with a beautiful woman." Bethany blushed at the casual compliment, and Yates realized he'd spoken more freely than intended. An awkward silence fell, broken only when their food arrived. As they ate, Bethany asked about the school in Cedar Springs. And Yates explained that the town had recently built a proper schoolhouse, but was struggling to find a teacher willing to relocate to the territory. The last one lasted 3 months before declaring the place too uncivilized and returning east, he said with a grin. That's a shame, Bethany replied thoughtfully. Children deserve education regardless of where they live. You sound like you miss teaching. I do, very much. It was my calling, I think, she sighed. But James has made it clear he expects his wife to focus on social obligations and running his household. He's quite prominent in San Francisco society. Something in her tone caught Yates's attention. And that's not what you want. She looked surprised by the direct question. I hadn't really considered what I want. After my parents died, I was focused on survival. James offered security, a comfortable life. But not teaching. No, not teaching. She toyed with her fork. It's ungrateful of me to question it. Many women would be thrilled with such an opportunity. It's not ungrateful to want a life that fulfills you, Yates said quietly. Security is important, but so is happiness. Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a connection that made Yates's heart beat faster. For a moment, he thought she might say more, but then she looked away. We should probably head back to the ranch, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I wouldn't want to overtire myself and face Martha's scolding. The ride back was quieter than the journey into town, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the lazy quay, the setting sun gilded the landscape in warm light, the ranch house a welcoming silhouette against the horizon. It's beautiful, Bethany said softly. You're home. Thank you. I've always thought so. As they stabled the horses, one of Yates's ranch hands approached with a telegram in hand. This came for Miss Rose while you were out, boss. Boy from town brought it over. Yates felt a knot form in his stomach as he thanked the man and handed the telegram to Bethany. Her face paled slightly as she took it, but her fingers were steady as she opened it. He watched as she read the brief message, her expression changing from anticipation to confusion to something that looked remarkably like relief. Is everything all right? He asked when she looked up. Yes, she said slowly. James has. He's married someone else. Yates blinked in surprise. What? She handed him the telegram. The message was brief and to the point. Regret to inform you circumstances changed. Married Catherine Wilson last month. Wish you well, James Elliott. He couldn't wait, she said, and to Yates's surprise, she laughed a genuine laugh of what sounded like relief. All those proper letters about patience and propriety, and he couldn't wait 2 extra months for his bride to arrive. Yates wasn't sure how to respond. I'm sorry seemed inappropriate given her reaction, but congratulations definitely wasn't right either, are you? Upset, he ventured. She considered the question seriously. I should be, shouldn't I? But honestly, I feel free. She shook her head in wonder. Is that terrible of me? No, Yates said firmly. Not if you weren't in love with him. I wasn't, she admitted. I respected him, was grateful for his interest, but no, I wasn't in love. I'm not sure I even knew what that meant. The knot in Yates's stomach dissolved, replaced by a warmth that spread through his chest. He tried to keep his voice casual as he asked, What will you do now? Reality seemed to crash back over her as she considered the question. I don't know. I have no money, no possessions. She straightened her shoulders. But I have skills. Perhaps Cedar Springs needs a teacher more than I need a husband. Yates couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. They do indeed, and I happen to know the head of the school board. Her eyes widened with hope. You do. Charles Montgomery owns the bank. Good man, desperate to find a qualified teacher before the fall term. He hesitated, then added, You could stay at the Lazy K while you get established. It's not far from town. You've already done so much for me. It's a big house, he interrupted. And Martha would love the company. She's been telling me for years the place needs a woman's touch. A slow smile spread across Bethany's face, lighting her eyes in a way that made Yates's heart skip. That's very generous of you. I accept, on the condition that you let me contribute in some way, perhaps by organizing your library properly, or helping with the accounts. Deal, he agreed, fighting the urge to take her hand. Now let's go inside before Martha sends out a search party. Over the next few weeks, Bethany became an integral part of life at the Lazy K. She completed the reorganization of Yates's library, helped Martha with household tasks, and even took an interest in the ranch operations, asking intelligent questions about cattle breeding and land management that impressed even the most seasoned hands. Yates arranged a meeting with Charles Montgomery, who was so impressed with Bethany's credentials and demeanor that he offered her the teaching position on the spot, with a salary generous enough to allow her to eventually secure her own accommodations in town. Though there's no rush, Yates assured her when she shared the news. The Lazy K is your home for as long as you want it to be. The word home hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. As July turned to August, they fell into a comfortable routine. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, sometimes reading aloud to each other from Bethany's growing collection of books, sometimes simply talking. Yates found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone about the war, about his sister's death, about his dreams for the ranch. In turn, Bethany spoke of her childhood in Boston, her passion for education, and her complicated relationship with her parents, who had loved her but never quite understood her independent spirit. On one such evening, as they watched a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Bethany asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Yates, why have you never married?" The directness of the question startled him, but he found he didn't mind. "Never met the right woman, I suppose, or when I did, circumstances weren't right." "What do you mean?" He considered how to explain. "There was someone in Kentucky before the war. Caroline was her name. We planned to marry, but then the fighting started. I joined up, and by the time I came back, she'd married someone else." "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "It was for the best. After the war, I wasn't the same person, needed a fresh start, and once I came out here, building the ranch took all my energy, didn't leave much time for courting." "But you must get lonely sometimes," she said softly. "In this big house." Their eyes met in the fading light, and Yates felt something shift between them, a boundary crossed, a truth acknowledged. "Yes," he admitted. "Until recently." The meaning behind his words hung in the air between them. Bethany's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "I should check on the horses," Yates said suddenly, standing. The moment felt too important, too fragile to risk saying the wrong thing. Bethany nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'll be here when you get back." The simple promise warmed him as he walked to the stables, his thoughts in turmoil. He was falling in love with Bethany. Rose had probably been falling since the moment he found her in the dust. But was it fair to tell her? She was just establishing herself, finding her independence after nearly committing to a loveless marriage. The last thing she needed was another man making claims on her future. When he returned to the porch, she was still there, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. Without speaking, he sat beside her, closer than before, their shoulders almost touching. "School starts in 3 weeks," she said after a comfortable silence. "I'm nervous but excited." "You'll be wonderful," he assured her. "The children will adore you." She smiled at his confidence. "I hope so. It feels right, teaching here. Like this is where I'm meant to be." Her words gave him courage. "Bethany, A shout from the direction of the bunkhouse interrupted him. One of the ranch hands was running toward the house, urgency in his movement. "Boss, riders coming in fast from the east." At least 6 of them. Yates was on his feet instantly, his instincts honed by years on the frontier. "Get inside," he told Bethany. "Tell Martha to bolt the doors." The fear in her eyes was tempered with resolve as she nodded and hurried into the house. Yates strode to meet his foreman, Jake, who was already organizing the other hands. "Could be nothing," Jake said, though his hand rested on his holstered revolver. "But ain't nobody has business here this time of night." "No, they don't," Yates agreed grimly. "Get the men spread out. No shooting unless they start it." The approaching riders came into view as they crested the rise leading to the ranch. 6 men, riding hard, their intent unclear but their haste suspicious. As they drew closer, Yates could see they were a rough-looking bunch, trail-worn and armed. They reined in their horses in the yard, dust billowing around them. The leader, a bearded man with a scar running down one cheek, surveyed the assembled ranch hands with calculating eyes before focusing on Yates. "This the Lazy K?" "It is," Yates replied evenly. "I'm Yates Kincaid, the owner." "What's your business here?" The man's lips curled in what might have been a smile. "Heard you might be harboring something that belongs to us." A cold realization dawned on Yates. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," the man drawled. "Pretty little thing, honey-colored hair. Word in town is she's been staying here since you found her on the trail, the Decker gang. It had to be." Yates kept his expression neutral even as rage built inside him. "The lady you're referring to was a victim of a stagecoach robbery. She lost everything." "Not everything," another rider interjected with a leer. "She still got herself, don't she?" Yates's hand inched toward his own revolver. "I suggest you boys move on. There's nothing for you here." The leader, Decker himself, Yates presumed, chuckled without humor. "See, that's where you're wrong. That woman saw our faces, can identify us. That makes her a problem." "She's under my protection," Yates stated, his voice hard. "And the protection of everyone on this ranch. You want her, you'll have to go through all of us." The tension in the yard was palpable, every man poised for violence. Decker's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation, the determined faces of the Lazy K hands, the strategic positions they'd taken up, the rifles gleaming in the fading light. "Might not be worth the trouble," one of his men muttered. "Sheriff's got patrols out looking for us already." Decker scowled but seemed to recognize the poor odds. "This ain't over, Kincaid. Nobody crosses the Decker gang. Seems to me you crossed the line when you started robbing stagecoaches and threatening women," Yates replied coldly. "Now get off my land before I decide the bounty on your heads is worth the bullets." For a tense moment, it seemed Decker might challenge him, but then the outlaw spat in the dust and wheeled his horse around. "Let's go, boys. We'll settle this another time." Yates and his men remained vigilant until the riders disappeared into the gathering darkness. Only then did he allow himself to exhale. "Jake, send 2 men to town right away. Alert Sheriff Taylor that the Decker gang was here. The rest of you stay alert tonight, they might circle back." The men dispersed to their assigned tasks while Yates hurried back to the house, worry for Bethany overriding everything else. He found her in the parlor with Martha, both women tense but composed. "They're gone," he announced as he entered. "For now." "Who were they?" Martha demanded. "The Decker gang, the same men who robbed the stagecoach." He looked at Bethany, whose face had gone pale. "They know you're here. Someone in town must have talked. They came for me," she whispered, understanding immediately, "because I can identify them." Yates nodded grimly. "I've sent men to alert the sheriff. He'll organize a proper pursuit, but until they're caught." "I'm a danger to everyone here," Bethany concluded, her voice strengthening with resolve. "I should leave." "Absolutely not," Yates and Martha said in unison. This is the safest place for you, Yates continued firmly. We have men, weapons, and the advantage of familiar territory. No one's going to harm you here. But your men could get hurt because of me. My men know the risks of ranch life, he interrupted. And every one of them would stand against men like Decker regardless. It's not just about you, Bethany. It's about what's right. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do we do now? We stay vigilant. No one rides alone. No one goes into town unaccompanied. He hesitated, then added, and I think you should learn to shoot. Her eyebrows rose in surprise, but she didn't object. All right, if you think it's necessary. I do. In this territory, it's a useful skill regardless. He glanced at Martha. Will you be all right here with the house hands while I take a patrol around the perimeter? The housekeeper nodded firmly. We'll be fine. I keep a shotgun under my bed, as you well know. Despite the gravity of the situation, Yates couldn't help but smile at her matter-of-fact tone. That I do. I'll be back in an hour or so. Before he could leave, Bethany stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. Be careful, she said softly. The touch and the concern in her eyes warmed him despite the circumstances. Always am. The night passed without incident, though no one at the Lazy K slept much. By morning, Sheriff Taylor and 4 deputies arrived, having tracked the Decker gang's trail until it disappeared in the rocky terrain to the north. They're headed for the high country, the sheriff informed Yates. Army's been alerted. They won't get far. What about Miss Rose? Yates asked. She's still in danger as long as they're free. Taylor nodded gravely. True enough. I can post a deputy here if you'd like. I'd appreciate that, at least until they're caught. The sheriff glanced toward the house, where Bethany could be seen through the window, helping Martha with breakfast preparations. She's settling in well, from what I hear. Mrs. Henderson tells me she's taken the teaching position in town. She has, Yates confirmed, ignoring the speculative look in the older man's eyes. She'll be excellent at it. Taylor hummed noncommittally. Well, good teachers are hard to come by out here. Be a shame if anything happened to her before she even starts. Nothing's going to happen to her, Yates stated with quiet intensity. Not while I have anything to say about it. The sheriff's mustache twitched with what might have been a suppressed smile. Glad to hear it. I'll have Deputy Wilson stay here for a few days. He's young but sharp-eyed. True to his word. That afternoon, Yates took Bethany to a secluded area of the ranch to teach her how to handle a revolver. She approached the lesson with the same focused determination she brought to everything, listening carefully to his instructions and practicing her stance with serious concentration. The key is to respect the weapon without fearing it, Yates explained as he positioned her hands on the Colt .45. It's a tool like any other. A dangerous tool, she commented, feeling the weight of the revolver. In the wrong hands, yes, but in the right hands it can protect. He stood behind her, adjusting her stance slightly. Now, focus on the target, breathe steady, and squeeze the trigger gently. She fired, the recoil stronger than she expected, but she held firm. The shot went wide of the tin can they'd set up as a target, but not by much. Good, Yates encouraged. Very good for a first try. Again, but this time, exhale as you squeeze. They practiced for over an hour, Bethany's aim improving with each attempt. By the end of the session, she was hitting the target regularly, her confidence growing visibly. You're a natural, Yates praised as they packed up to return to the house. Hardly, she replied with a self-deprecating smile. But I'm a quick study, always have been. It's more than that. You have steady hands and good instincts. He hesitated, then added more seriously. I hope you never need to use these skills, but if you do. I won't hesitate, she finished for him. I understand what's at stake. Their eyes met, and Yates felt the same connection that had been growing between them since her arrival, a bond of trust and mutual respect that was deepening into something more profound. "Bethany," he began, knowing it was time to speak what was in his heart, danger or no danger. "Yes," she prompted when he fell silent, her eyes searching his. "I want you to know that regardless of what happens with the Decker gang, you have a place here. Not just until school starts or until you find your own accommodations in town, but for as long as you want it." Her expression softened. "Yates, I'm not asking for anything," he hurried to add. "I just want you to know that you have options. That there are people who care about what happens to you. People," she repeated, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Or you specifically." The directness of her question caught him off guard, but it was time for honesty. "Me specifically," he admitted. "I care very much what happens to you, Bethany, more than I expected to, more than might be proper, given the circumstances." A slow smile spread across her face, transforming it with a radiance that took his breath away. "Nothing about our meeting was proper, Yates. I fainted in the dust and you brought me to your home. Convention was abandoned from the start." Her lightness eased the tension in his chest. "That's true enough. And as for caring," she continued, her voice softening, "the feeling is mutual. Surely you must know that by now." Hope surged through him, but he kept his tone measured. "I didn't want to presume. You've been through so much and you're just finding your independence." "Independence doesn't have to mean solitude," she countered. "I've spent my whole life being what others expected me to be: the dutiful daughter, the proper teacher, the potential mail-order bride. For the first time, I'm discovering who I truly am and what I truly want." "And what is it that you want?" Yates asked, his heart hammering in his chest. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "To teach, to make a difference in children's lives, to build a life in this wild, beautiful place." Her voice dropped to a near whisper, "And to explore this connection between us, wherever it might lead." It was all the invitation Yates needed. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. Her lips were soft against his, hesitant at first, then responding with increasing warmth. His hands found her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, expressing all the feelings that had been building since he first found her in the desert. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you," he confessed. "Even unconscious and covered in dust," she teased, though her eyes shimmered with emotion. "Especially then. You looked like you needed someone to fight for you. And then you woke up and proved you could fight for yourself." She laughed softly, her hands still resting on his chest. "Perhaps we can fight together from now on." "I'd like that very much," he agreed, kissing her once more before reluctantly stepping back. "But right now, we should get back to the house before Martha sends out a search party." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the ranch, both aware that danger still lurked but somehow less afraid to face it together. The next week passed in a state of heightened vigilance but also deepening connection. Yates and Bethany continued their shooting lessons, and she proved an apt pupil, her confidence growing with each session. In the evenings, they no longer pretended their time together was merely friendship. They sat close on the porch swing, sometimes talking late into the night, sometimes simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. Martha observed the developing relationship with obvious approval, though she limited her comments to knowing smiles and the occasional muttered, "About time." Deputy Wilson remained at the ranch, vigilant but unobtrusive. News came that the Army had engaged with part of the Decker gang near the territorial border, capturing 2 members, but Decker himself and the others remained at large. As August progressed, Bethany began preparing for the start of the school term. reviewing textbooks and developing lesson plans. Yates found her enthusiasm infectious and often sat with her in the evenings, discussing her ideas and offering insights about the children she would be teaching. Most of them have never had formal schooling, he explained one night as they reviewed a geography text. Their parents do their best, but they're focused on survival, on building homes and farms in harsh conditions. All the more reason they deserve a proper education, Bethany replied passionately. Knowledge is what will transform this territory from a frontier to a true community. Yates smiled at her fervor. You sound like my mother. She used to say education was the true mark of civilization. I would have liked your mother, Bethany said softly. She would have adored you, he replied with certainty. She always hoped I'd find a woman of substance and intelligence, not just a pretty face. And have you? She teased, her eyes sparkling in the lamplight. He took her hand, his expression serious despite his smile. I've found more than I ever dared hope for. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the study door. Deputy Wilson stood there, his young face apologetic. Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Kincaid, but there's a rider coming in. One of your hands recognized him as a messenger from the Double C Ranch. Yates frowned. The Double C was owned by Clayton Carter, a neighboring rancher with whom Yates had cordial if not close relations. A messenger at this hour usually meant trouble. I'll see him, he said, rising. Bethany, perhaps you should. I'm coming with you, she stated firmly, standing as well. If there's news about Decker, I should hear it. He nodded, accepting her decision, and they went together to the front porch where the messenger, a trail-worn cowboy in his 30s, was dismounting. Evening, Mr. Kincaid, the man greeted, removing his hat. Name's Peterson. Mr. Carter sent me with news he thought you should know right away. What is it? Yates asked, tension evident in his stance. Army captured another of the Decker gang yesterday. Fella was wounded, talked plenty before he died. Said Decker's planning something big, a raid on your ranch. He's got a personal grudge now, aims to make an example of you and take the lady. The cowboy nodded respectfully toward Bethany. Yates's jaw tightened. Did he say when? Soon is all we know. Mr. Carter's sending 5 of his best men to help you, should be here by morning. He said to tell you neighbors stand together. That's mighty generous of him, Yates said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Please convey my thanks. You're welcome to rest here tonight before riding back. The messenger accepted the offer gratefully, and Yates instructed one of the hands to show him to the bunkhouse after he'd had something to eat. Once they were alone again, Bethany turned to Yates, her face pale but determined. He's coming for me specifically. For both of us, Yates corrected. But it changes nothing. We're prepared, and now we'll be even better defended with Carter's men. She nodded slowly. I won't be the cause of bloodshed, Yates. If he comes, don't even think it, he interrupted, taking her shoulders gently. You are not to sacrifice yourself for any reason. These men are outlaws with prices on their heads. They've killed innocent people. They deserve whatever comes to them if they're foolish enough to attack us. The intensity in his voice seemed to reassure her. All right, but promise me you'll be careful. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. Nothing is going to happen to either of us, he promised, drawing her into his embrace. We have too much to look forward to. The next morning, true to his word, Clayton Carter's men arrived, experienced hands who had faced their share of trouble on the frontier. Yates integrated them into the ranch's defenses, positioning men strategically around the property and establishing a rotation of lookouts. Sheriff Taylor also returned with news that 2 more deputies were on their way from the county seat, along with a contingent of Army scouts who had been tracking the remaining members of the Decker gang. They can't possibly succeed, Bethany remarked as she and Yates watched the preparations from the porch. Even Decker must realize he's outnumbered and outgunned. Logic isn't what drives men like Decker, Yates replied grimly. Pride and vengeance are powerful motivators, often stronger than self-preservation. She considered this, then said quietly, "I should still be able to start school next week." The comment, so mundane amid the preparations for potential violence, startled a laugh from Yates. "Is that what you're worried about?" "Among other things," she admitted with a small smile. "Life goes on, Yates, even in uncertain times, perhaps especially then." He marveled at her resilience, her ability to look beyond the immediate danger to the future they were building. "You're right. And yes, you'll be teaching on schedule. I'll make sure of it." The attack, when it came, was not the frontal assault everyone had been expecting. It came in the pre-dawn hours 2 days later, beginning with a diversionary fire set in one of the distant hay barns. As men rushed to contain the blaze, Decker and 3 remaining gang members attempted to infiltrate the main house from the rear. They might have succeeded had not one of Carter's men, returning from the outhouse, spotted movement and raised the alarm. Gunfire erupted in the darkness, bullets splintering wood and shattering windows. Yates, who had been sleeping lightly in the parlor to be near the front door, was on his feet instantly. "Bethany!" he shouted, racing toward the stairs. She appeared at the top, fully dressed despite the hour, the revolver he'd given her gripped firmly in her hand. "I'm all right. Where are they?" "Back of the house. Stay up there." But even as he spoke, a crash from the kitchen indicated at least one of the attackers had breached the house. Yates positioned himself at the base of the stairs, his own weapon drawn, determined that no one would get past him to Bethany. The kitchen door burst open, and a man Yates recognized as Decker himself lunged through, a revolver in each hand. He fired wildly, forcing Yates to dive for cover behind the sturdy oak sideboard. "Come out, Kincaid," Decker shouted. "Give us the woman and maybe you'll live through this." "Not going to happen, Decker," Yates called back, measuring the distance to better cover. "Your gang's finished. Army's got half your men already. Surrender now, you might avoid the noose." Decker's response was another volley of gunfire. Yates waited for the pause, then moved swiftly to a better position, firing as he went. His shot caught Decker in the shoulder, spinning the outlaw around but not dropping him. Cursing, Decker took cover in the dining room. "You're dead, Kincaid. You and that bitch both." From upstairs came the sharp crack of Bethany's revolver, followed by a cry of pain. Yates glanced up to see her at the railing, her face pale but determined. "One tried to come up the back stairs," she called down. "I winged him. He retreated." Pride surged through Yates even as fear for her safety nearly overwhelmed him. "Stay back from the railing." Outside, the gunfire was intensifying as the ranch hands engaged with the other gang members. Yates could hear shouted commands, and the thunder of hooves as reinforcements arrived, likely the Army scouts Sheriff Taylor had mentioned. Decker seemed to realize his plan had failed. With a roar of rage, he burst from the dining room, firing wildly as he charged toward the stairs toward Bethany. Time seemed to slow for Yates. He stepped into the open, his focus narrowing to the outlaw threatening the woman he loved. His first shot caught Decker in the leg, staggering him. The second hit center mass, dropping the outlaw to his knees. But Decker wasn't finished. With a final surge of hatred, he raised his gun toward the top of the stairs where Bethany stood. Yates's third shot and Bethany's simultaneous fire struck Decker in the chest and head. He collapsed, his weapons clattering to the floor, his reign of terror finally ended. In the sudden silence, Yates looked up to meet Bethany's eyes. The connection between them was palpable, both had acted to protect the other. Both had faced death and emerged victorious. "Are you hurt?" He called up to her. "No," she replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. I'm fine, stay there until we're sure it's over." Outside, the shooting had stopped, replaced by shouts of "clear," and we got them. Yates moved cautiously to the front door, opening it to find Sheriff Taylor and several soldiers approaching the house. "Decker?" the sheriff asked tersely. "Dead," Yates confirmed. "Inside?" Taylor nodded grimly. "The others are either dead or captured. It's over, Kincaid." Relief washed over Yates as the full import of the sheriff's words registered. Truly over, truly. The territory's safer today than it was yesterday. Taylor glanced toward the house. "Miss Rose all right, she is," Yates said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "She handled herself like a true frontierswoman." The cleanup took most of the day. Bodies were removed, statements taken, damages assessed. The hay barn was a total loss, but otherwise, the Lazy K had survived the attack remarkably intact. A few broken windows, some bullet holes in the walls, nothing that couldn't be repaired. By evening, a semblance of normalcy had returned. The extra hands from the Double C headed home with Yates's heartfelt thanks. The soldiers departed with their prisoners, and Sheriff Taylor left with assurances that the territory's most notorious outlaw gang was finished for good. Finally, Yates and Bethany found themselves alone on the porch, watching the sunset as they had so many evenings before, yet with the profound awareness that everything had changed. "You were magnificent," Yates said softly, taking her hand. "I've never seen such courage." She shook her head slightly. "I was terrified, but I couldn't let him hurt you. That's what courage is, acting despite fear." He raised her hand to his lips. "When I saw him aiming at you—" "I know," she whispered. "I felt the same when he was charging toward you." They sat in silence for a moment, processing the day's events and the emotions they had stirred. "School starts Monday," Bethany said finally, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I should probably focus on my lesson plans rather than gunfights." Yates laughed, the sound releasing the last of the tension he'd been carrying. "I think you've earned a reputation that will ensure perfect behavior from your students." "I certainly hope not," she replied with mock severity. "A little healthy mischief is important for children's development." "Is that so, Miss Rose?" he teased. "And what about for adults?" Her eyes sparkled in the fading light. "Absolutely essential, Mr. Kincaid." He leaned in to kiss her then. A gentle kiss that deepened with all the emotion of the day, the fear, the relief, the joy of survival, and the promise of tomorrow. When they parted, Yates kept her close, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Bethany," he said softly, "I know this is sudden, and perhaps improper given how short a time we've known each other, but today made something very clear to me." She turned to face him, her expression open and expectant. "What's that?" "Life is unpredictable and precious. I don't want to waste a moment of it." He took both her hands in his. "I love you. I want to build a life with you here at the Lazy K, with you teaching in town, with children of our own someday. If you'll have me." Tears glistened in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Are you proposing, Yates Kincaid?" "I believe I am," Bethany rose, rather inexpertly but with all my heart. She laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to fill the gathering darkness with light. "Then I accept, inexpert proposal and all. I love you too, you know, more than I thought possible." He kissed her again, sealing their promise under the vast Arizona sky, both knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the Cedar Springs Church, a simple but joyful ceremony attended by the entire town and most of the surrounding ranchers. Martha cried unabashedly, declaring it about time this house had a proper mistress, while Sheriff Taylor served as best man and Mrs. Whitfield, recovered from her ordeal, stood proudly as Bethany's matron of honor. Bethany wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha and the ladies of the town had worked day and night to create, holding a bouquet of desert wildflowers that Yates had gathered at dawn. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up nearly lifted the roof from the small church. The celebration continued well into the evening, with feasting and dancing at the town hall. As the night deepened, Yates led his bride home to the lazy K, their home now, truly and completely. Standing on the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking and dreaming, Yates swept Bethany into his arms, carrying her across the threshold as tradition demanded. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kincaid," he murmured, setting her gently on her feet in the parlor. "It already feels like home," she replied, her eyes shining with happiness. "It has since the moment I woke up here." Later, as they lay in each other's arms in what was now their bedroom, Bethany traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "It's strange," she mused. "If the stagecoach hadn't been robbed, if I hadn't been forced to walk through the desert, if I hadn't fainted in the dust with nowhere to go. If I hadn't found you," Yates continued, catching her hand and kissing her palm. "We might never have met," she finished. "I'd be in San Francisco now, married to a man I didn't love, never knowing what I was missing." "Perhaps some things are meant to be," Yates suggested. "Despite all the hardship, despite the danger." "Perhaps," she agreed. "Or perhaps we make our own destiny by the choices we make in the face of adversity." "Either way," he said, pulling her closer, "I'm grateful for whatever forces brought you to me, Bethany Kincaid." "As am I," she whispered against his lips. "As am I." Bethany's first day of school arrived bright and clear, a perfect September morning. 28 children of various ages gathered in the newly furnished schoolhouse, their faces a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and in some cases, stubborn resistance. Yates had insisted on escorting her to town, though they both knew the danger was past. In truth, he simply wanted to share this moment with her, to witness the beginning of this new chapter in her life. At the schoolhouse door, he kissed her lightly, mindful of watching eyes. "You'll be wonderful," he assured her. "Those children don't know how lucky they are." She squeezed his hand, nervous but determined. "I'll see you at 4. I'll be here," he promised. "Have a good day, Mrs. Kincaid." The name still brought a smile to her face, a month into their marriage. "You too, Mr. Kincaid." He watched as she entered the schoolhouse, her back straight, her step confident. Through the window, he could see the children rising from their desks as she introduced herself, could almost feel the authority and warmth she projected as she began to bring order to the diverse group. Satisfied that she was exactly where she was meant to be, Yates mounted his horse and rode back to the Lazy K, his heart full with the life they were building together. The months passed in a rhythm of work and love, challenges and triumphs. Bethany's school flourished under her guidance, with even the most reluctant students gradually responding to her combination of high expectations and genuine care. Yates expanded the Lazy K-TKS operations, secure in the knowledge that he was building not just for himself now, but for their future together. When spring came to the Arizona territory, bringing wildflowers and renewed life to the desert landscape, Bethany shared news that completed their happiness. She was expecting their first child. "A Christmas baby," Yates marveled, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "A boy or a girl, do you think? It's far too early to tell," she laughed. "But either way, this child will be loved." "Immeasurably," he agreed, drawing her into his embrace, "and taught by the finest teacher in the territory." As they stood together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Bethany leaned into her husband's strength, grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought her here from fainting in the dust with nowhere to go, to finding a home, a purpose, and a love that would last a lifetime. In the years that followed, the Kincaid family grew and prospered. Their firstborn, a daughter they named Alina after Yates's mother, was joined 2 years later by a son, William. The Lazy K expanded to become one of the most successful ranches in the territory, known for its fair treatment of workers and innovative breeding practices. Bethany continued teaching until the birth of their third child, after which she focused on establishing a lending library for the growing town. The small collection of books she and Yates had shared during their courtship became the foundation for an institution that would educate generations of Cedar Springs citizens. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the ranch settled for the night, Yates and Bethany would sit on their porch, hands entwined, and marvel at the journey that had brought them together, a chance encounter in the desert that had led to a lifetime of love, partnership, and shared purpose. And in those moments, they knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had from the very beginning when she fainted in the dust with nowhere to go, and he brought her home to heal.